Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Each episode, we talk about a particular topic in the life of a professor. We are tenure-track faculty members in the sciences, working at a primarily undergraduate university in California. The purpose of our podcast is reflection, so we bring something we think is working and something we're working on to discuss. Welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. I'm Claire.
And I'm Ruth, and this week we're going to talk about class modality. But before we do that, Claire, how was your week?
My week has been great. I have been rereading Harry Potter. I started at number 4, and now I'm at number 7. And it's been a few years since I've read it. I had to actually go out and buy the 7th one, which makes me feel like it's been, I'm not sure how long that means it's been since I've reread them. But I'm loving being with the characters and in the world, and I'm really appreciating the art of weaving the story together and having all these cool themes. And anyway, it's been a lot of fun.
You know, so I have 2 questions. One, do you have a favorite?
Oh.
Is that too personal? One. Okay. Prisoner of Azkaban's so good, man.
Yeah,
so
time
good.
travel, I know. But the 4th one is also awesome. I love the Triwizard Tournament. So those are my 2 favorites, I think.
Yeah. The other thing, I have read them many times. Mm-hmm. And the first time, I think in my head, I was like, 1 and 2... they're just whatever. And then when I went back and read them and realized how much of the story is seeded in there, Sirius's motorbike is in there, and stuff that it really is extremely well crafted.
So well crafted. It's amazing how many things are in those early books that become really important later. Yeah.
Right. I think in my head I was like, it doesn't get serious till book 3 or something or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then when you go back and read them, you're like, oh no, it's all there.
It's all there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. I love it.
So
how about you? How was your week?
My week has been really good. I had a couple of things, actually also Harry Potter related, which is I have been really in a long-term relationship with this podcast called Harry Potter and the Sacred Text, which is just amazing. And they read each chapter of the book and talk about it through a theme, like commitment or trust or hope or whatever.
Love it.
And it's just a phenomenal, lovely podcast. And so the current host is leaving. They finished book 7 and they had a live thing on Zoom. And I went to it, which is kind of out of a thing I just don't do. Normally I'm I just hear about it later. And I actually went to it and it was so lovely. And it's so strange to sort of feel like you know these people after 5 years, and
sure,
it was just very cool. It was a very nice thing.
That's awesome. That sounds great.
I have another life update, which is somebody has very generously loaned me a car at the moment, which is great, and it's gears, driving stick. And I learned how to driving stick in Ireland, but oh my God, I forgot about the absolute terror of hill starts when you're driving gears, and so yeah.
I can see that. I've never gotten completely comfortable with driving stick, but I do remember that my technique was rev the engine, even if I was just going on flat, Dude,
I literally, the first day I drove it, it turned off, I didn't, at the stop sign. And to compensate, I revved it so much, I absolutely terrified this lady standing on the, sidewalk.
Yes, and poor pedestrians nearby.
Yeah, I've definitely got more control over the situation now, but I was and the kids were like, what are you doing, Mom? And I was like, nothing, don't worry, everything's fine. So yes, but so there we go. That's, keeping the brain young, remembering old things and whatnot. So yeah, that's
totally
good. So tell me,
in
go ahead.
Ireland, do they drive on the right side of the road or the left side of the road?
We drive, I was going to say on the right side, as in the correct side of the road. No, we drive on the left side of the road. So that was another thing. I was kind of wait, does the order of the clutch and the brake the same? Or it just was it took a minute.
Did you use your other hand? Did you have to switch which hand you're used to adjusting the...
Yes.
I see.
So I feel actually now that you're saying this, I feel a little bit less judgmental of myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. Thanks, Claire.
There's no muscle memory. It was all reversed.
Right. Oh, that's a really good point, actually. Because I was kind of thinking, when I've gone home to Ireland, I just go back into it straight away and there's no issue. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's what it was about. Okay, good.
Okay.
I'm taking it.
So, do you have a quote for us today?
I do, and it's from a comedian called Hannah Gadsby. Okay. And I watched the special. There's 2 comedy specials on Netflix at the moment. One is called Nanette and one is called Douglas. And I generally can't cope with stand-up comedy because it makes me very anxious. But these are just really phenomenal and amazing. And they'll kind of rip your heart out, but also deeply hilarious and wonderful. But the quote is, "There is nothing stronger than a broken woman who has rebuilt herself."
Ooh.
And I think it's so lovely. And it's such a lovely reframe of like people who've undergone tough things. So I think like it's strange because, especially in Nanette, Douglas is just kind of funny. And Nanette is quite funny and intense. But it also is quite hopeful. Because I think that's such a lovely message of hope. So
yes.
I love it. It really struck me.
I think that is so true about rebuilding. Like the things you really work on, you get really good at. And so anyway, I love that going through bad events, you can think about how you're going to be stronger once you've been rebuilt.
Right, and this is a little bit of a sidestep, but it's kind of like a thing with parenting where you almost feel like your job is to make sure your kids have absolutely no hardships. And it's really not ultimately like really, really what you want, because what would, there's no...
How do you learn anything?
Right, and it's just not even possible. And so, but it's just this idea that like success as a parent would be if your kid is completely unblemished and like doesn't have any stress in their life ever. And it's really not very realistic.
That makes sense.
So, yeah. Not that I'm going to like torture my children just to build their character or something, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, tell me, what are we talking about today?
So class modality. So we're talking about, you've got a virtual or a hybrid class. What format do you want to choose for that? And so there's tons of options, as lots of instructors have been choosing from lately, or just working with lately. So we wanted to talk about why you might choose one over the other, or what different perks of different ones might be. And so at our university, we just recently went through the process of choosing what modality we wanted to have for our fall semester classes. And we had quite a variety of options. There was lots of vocab to learn. There was like bi-synchronous and high flex, and I still don't really know what all those mean.
I was hoping you were going to explain those, but...
But we're mostly thinking about, when do you want to meet synchronously in your virtual class versus asynchronously? If you have a hybrid class where some people are there and some people aren't there, how do you work with that? And kind of just what we ended up choosing and why is what we're thinking.
Yeah, it seems like, because it was weird, right? When COVID started, there was no in between. Like it was just all online. And then and then this semester, it seems like there's infinite permutations and combinations. And,
yes.
And it's tricky. I think it is tricky for students when they're trying to pick their classes at the moment.
It's tricky, and it's not quite clear what it all means, because we're all new to this system. Like, in fact, totally. I submitted my plan for the fall, and it included 2 face-to-face labs and a virtual lab. And for the virtual lab, I still wanted it to be clear that we were meeting, or that the lab was 3 hours twice a week, but I only wanted to be synchronous for 2 hours a week. Know. And that was kind of confusing. That turns out to be bisynchronous, according to our definitions, by the way. But I only learned that after I submitted it.
Can I ask you, is bi-synchronous or bi-weekly or whatever, does that mean twice a week or every 2 weeks?
I always look it up and cannot remember and cannot tell you.
Sorry to put you on the spot. Like, on the podcast, on record.
On record, I don't know.
That's fine. Well, I said I don't know either.
So what did you end up going with, and what is working for you with your class modality? You are fully virtual last semester, this semester, and next semester, as I am aware.
Yes. Yeah. So we're fully virtual. I don't actually know what to call it. So I'm fully virtual, but we are meeting synchronously, but not for every class period. So what is that called?
That might be bisynchronous, but I don't know.
So
go ahead.
So my lectures are pre-recorded, or will be pre-recorded, and then we'll meet for like tutorial or activity and labs.
Cool.
So on Wednesday and Friday.
So just like if it was all face-to-face, you'd have lecture, you'd have activity, and you'd have lab. And now the lecture part is asynchronous, and the other ones are synchronous.
Yeah. And I have no real commitment to this being a correct decision. So I think basically for me, it was external factors sort of made my decision for me. Do you know what I mean? So I think having the kids at home meant I wanted to limit my time live on Zoom. And so being able to record the lectures at different times, like on the weekend or when my husband can take the kids, or, you know, just other factors made it a lot easier to make that work. And so, but then I still wanted to have some, I think because generally I have students who are like earlier in their time at university, I still wanted to have some contact time. And so it seemed most efficient to do the actual like problem solving and lab stuff together. Whether it's effective, I don't know. But I think, so that kind of is what made my decision for me. I wanted to have contact and have sort of some routine to the week. And I think that the qualities that are really like enjoyable for people when they have more flexibility is usually people who are, I'm saying mature learners, but I don't necessarily mean age, but just they're able to regulate themselves a bit more, basically, and
it's
stay
not
on
like
task.
when it's their first year in college, you think it'd be better to have more structure to when you're meeting and stuff. Okay.
And I definitely had students, you know, who struggled a little bit with, because we did have some students move to campus, and so they could be quite isolated if they were on their own, away from home for the first time. Anyway, so I think it's okay the way it's turned out. I think that so I don't know. I think I do think it's a good idea to meet with students, especially these students. I think it's good to have them there to do problem solving because I think that's a really difficult skill to learn, and I think a lot of people sort of can convince themselves by watching other people doing stuff or just looking at solutions. You know, but actually having to have a dialogue with people in awkward breakout rooms is good for them. So I think that, I don't know if I'm not selling any of this, but I think in some ways for me, it was good that there was these external factors. So I kind of didn't have to make a decision, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that is interesting. Like, of course, it's nice to be able to make the decision, but it's also kind of nice. It can be nice to just say, this is what we're doing. And you say, okay, I guess I need to figure that out. So, okay.
Yeah. So tell me. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, we're doing the polite dance. You go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say, so is what I'm hearing from this is it's working for you to have the activity and the lab synchronous so that they have a little more structure in their schedule, and hopefully therefore keep up with the material and stuff. Is that correct? Yes,
I think so. And I think, I don't know, like, and I don't know if I'm just not creative enough in how I'm making the materials, because I hear about other people doing really cool, fully asynchronous things. And I just don't totally know how to do that with this material. And I think there is an element of them needing to work together. I think it's very hard for students to find times to meet up. So having it be, no, we're just doing lab now and you're doing it together, I think can be helpful. Like in some ways for them, if it's out of their hands to choose when it is, sometimes that could be a good thing.
Totally.
So,
that makes sense.
So tell me about yours, because yours is way more complicated.
Well, okay. So let's just, so what's working for me, I've got a lecture and a lab that are both the same class, but let's talk about the lecture first. So what's working for me, I'm meeting synchronously even for lecture. And I really have been enjoying that. I'm meeting on GatherTown, which I've talked about before in here. I like GatherTown just because we have a physical, it's not physical, it's a virtual space, but it looks like a physical space. There's like rooms and we walk around as our little avatars. And at least I find it nice that we have our own space for the class. And I imagine that some students do too, although I don't know that for sure. But anyway, I really like that we're meeting synchronously for lecture. I find that allows the students to ask questions like as we're going through the content. And I like that I can give them time. You know, I present some stuff and then they think about it and try to work on something right then during the lecture. You know, we haven't gone all the way through it yet. And then I do, you know, send them out to work in groups midway through the lecture sometimes. We intersperse that in. So I find that it's more interactive. I've heard people talk about perks of asynchronous lectures, of course, are that the students can watch it. And if they get confused, they just backtrack 5 minutes and watch that part again. And that can be really nice. So I certainly see that there's lots of perks to having it pre-recorded. But I've been really enjoying making the lecture more interactive by having those little pauses where we can talk about things, address a question, have them work in groups, and then come back together. So I've been really liking that. And I also have my office hours scheduled, and I'm on GatherTown at those particular office hours, which I found works pretty well. You know, some students come regularly and ask questions, and it does feel more like we're in my office, you know, because they can leave the office and then go work on something and then come back. And of course, we could do that with emails too, or we could schedule a Zoom time, but I kind of like just having it scheduled that these are my office hours when I will be on this virtual space and you can come. Yes.
Dude, see, the minute you're saying it, I'm like, I wish I had synchronous lectures, because that's like how I used to run my class was,
Sure.
you know, during the class, and then, oh, you try this part of the problem. Okay, great. What did everybody get? And, oh, we'll do this in groups. And it was just like a really, I'm saying it now and I'm probably romanticizing it a bit, but it was a really well-oiled ebb and flow of me talking, them doing stuff, you know, and that's like, it was really, yeah, I really liked how it was. And sometimes even in my lectures, I'm so used to saying things where I'd be like, and you try it. And then I'd be like, and I have no way of knowing if you're doing that. Or like, it's just like so weird.
But you should. We'll just give you a couple minutes. Try it right now. Yeah, totally.
And the other thing is about, I am finding this semester, I'm really struggling with engagement with my students.
Okay.
Which everyone was a complete hot mess last semester because there were so many stressors. And this semester, like, is easier. I'm doing air quotes because we don't have as many external traumas happening, but everyone's just so burnt out. But one thing I'm actually noticing is students' tolerance for watching videos is so ridiculously low. So even that thing of like, okay, they could go back and rewatch them. And like, when you kind of get advice about what's the optimal length, like it's kind of getting, I think they want it to be like a TikTok video or something.
Sure. I mean, I have trouble watching videos myself. Whenever I'm trying to find a recipe or something, I'm like, video? No, I just want the recipe.
yeah, totally. And so I think I really miss that. I think synchronous lectures are, yeah, I think if I could, I would, if you know what I mean.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it also depends on the student. Like I had a student last semester who was super into the asynchronous, and a few students have told me that it actually works well for them to do the asynchronous thing. But then, yeah, I don't know. Obviously, it depends. What else was I going to say about that? Oh, and then I record the synchronous lectures and then post them late after the fact. And I was kind of like, you know, this is so that if you happen to miss class for some reason, you could go back to it. But I do give them attendance points, so they're supposed to come. But anyway, one day, it was like the next day, and I had forgotten to post it for some reason, and someone said, oh, are you going to post that? And I was like, whoa, this is cool, because I didn't know that any of you were actually watching them, and now you noticed it wasn't there and wanted it. So anyway, that was a good reminder that they do sometimes go back. Well,
that's interesting too, because then that issue of like needing to, if you wanted to watch something again,
it's there. That's true. Yeah. And I do know, like, some instructors record their lectures that are live, real face-to-face lectures, and post them afterwards. And that's kind of a cool idea for catching those people who do want to go back and,
you know, I'm kind of barely getting comfortable with seeing my own face on Zoom recordings. I'm pretty sure, like, the whole of me writing on the board, I'm like,
I know,
I'm not sure.
I know. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but maybe we'll work up to it. So I just basically convinced myself the exact opposite of what I said originally. Well,
maybe you're saying you do like meeting synchronously for activity and lab, and you would also like to meet for lecture.
Yeah, I think, yeah. And I think that people can really artfully create like discussion forums and things and really connect with students, but I don't think I have those skills yet to like really, I find it even, honestly, like, I have a few students and I really don't know what they look like because they never put on the camera. And I was thinking, God, it'll be so weird when we go back and those students might come up to me.
Totally.
Like,
they're going to come to your office and you'll be like, hello, nice to meet you. And you're like,
for the very first
your
time.
Whole class
Yeah,
last semester. Yeah, totally.
It's tricky. Okay.
So what are you working on with class modality?
I think one thing that I have not done in any way, shape or form is getting feedback from students about what works for them.
Oh, okay.
And so I think for me, there was kind of just the urgency of like, my life is happening this way, so this is what needs to happen. And
right.
I'm not sure I could really do that any other way. And like, if students were like, no, you have to be on Zoom for 10 hours a week, if I'd be like, okay, because I just can't make that happen. So,
right.
But I wonder if that would be, and like, I think after the kind of cobbled together semester we did when we all suddenly went online halfway through, I think there was some unofficial feedback from students. Like there was a survey, well, not that unofficial, like there was a survey that went around, and it seemed like a lot of students appreciated having some synchronous contact during the week. So
I think so.
I definitely, maybe that fed into it a bit. And then I guess something I'm just wondering is, like, will any of this carry back to time after the pandemic? Like, I wonder, would there be any, I don't know what I would hope for, but it's just sort of interesting to have things be so structured and rigid. And then now it's like, oh, just whatever you think is best is what you should do. And I wonder, will we be able to carry any of that kind of autonomy back? Like, could a professor be like, I think we don't need to meet, X amount of times a week. I think it's fine if they watch these videos and just come in for one lab a week, or, and I'm not like saying
and it would still be the same number of units for that class. It's
right.
just that we're meeting virtually or asynchronously for, interesting question.
But it's just so weird that we have so much
flexibility.
Right. And so I don't know. And I don't know what I would actually choose, because I think I quite liked the structure before, but it's just really interesting to think we went from that, where it's like, no, these are the rules. You have to meet 4 times a week, and that's equivalent to this many units. And then now it's like, well, just do your best, or whatever it is. And so,
I do appreciate that we're just doing our best and choosing whatever we want. But that is really interesting about whether we might be able to carry on. I'm sure that that's going to be a discussion.
And it's so tricky, because like, I've heard of quite a few students who, like, say they're taking 2 classes that are online, and then they have 1 class that's face-to-face. Do they want to move back up here to take that 1 class?
Exactly.
Can they rearrange their schedule so they don't have to take it? Or do we need to provide everyone with... It's just so tricky. It kind of boggles the mind to think about what going back to normal will look like, or is there going to be any normal, or...
We're just going to have a slow asymptote getting towards normal.
Right, and I guess it's going to be some kind of new normal, so it's just weird. It's a weird thought.
Yeah, that is interesting. What would we keep?
Right, or I think I've talked about on here that my kids' spring break never lines up with ours. And so, like, could that be an option for me? Like, could I say, okay, so actually this week is completely online. We won't be meeting in class this week. And would that be an acceptable thing to do if I had asynchronous lectures and a Zoom lecture, or a Zoom meeting for lab? Like, could that be a thing we do?
Yeah, that's a good question. And you've talked before about having virtual office hours has worked well for you in the past, in like evening times, and maybe that'd be worth doing even not in the evening. Who knows? Yeah.
Totally.
Interesting.
Yeah. So tell me, what are you working on?
So I'm working on the lab. For my classes. And so what we've been doing, last semester, this semester, and next semester, I have kind of a hybrid format where some of the students are coming in face-to-face for lab, and some of the students are virtual. And so last semester, I just had those who came in face-to-face, those who didn't. It was, their choice whether they did or not. So some people in each lab section were virtual, and some people were face-to-face. The virtual people, I just gave them a little extra assignment that was supposed to... it was designed for them to go into the procedure and kind of get some of the same stuff they might get out of it if they were actually doing it. And then I gave them some data, and then they worked up the report. This semester, it's the more advanced class, and I normally have them work in groups and work on different instruments. And so anyway, what I'm doing this semester is the virtual students are grouped up with face-to-face students. And so I have 1 or 2 people in each group is face-to-face, and then another person or 2 are virtual. And then the virtual people are on little iPads. And so in the lab, I have my groups of students, but some of them are on iPads, and they carry the iPads around with
Oh my God,
them.
I don't know why that feels just so hilarious. It's like
it is pretty
portable
funny.
head.
Because and a funny thing is, if I'm in the prep room where I like make solutions for them, I can kind of eavesdrop on what they're saying, but then the virtual people, depending on how loud they've made the iPad, either the virtual people are really loud or the virtual people I can't hear their side of the conversation, so I'm like overhearing half of conversation. It's pretty funny.
Dude, that's something I miss so much about being in class is eavesdropping.
Oh, it's great to eavesdrop. I really
not
enjoy
easy
it.
in the breakout rooms because they know you're there.
Yeah,
So
they know as soon as you come. Totally. So I think the iPads are working pretty well. Sometimes the students who are virtual, there's nothing they can really help with, and I've heard a few of them say they feel kind of useless at certain times, so that's non-ideal, but they do help with, usually there's some calculations that they need to do, usually there's some data that needs to be plotted. They can do all that, and actually it's great that the data can be plotted in real time while the face-to-face students are getting it, and they can share their screen, and everybody can look at the graph, and so that can be cool. So, and I think even the times when they're feeling useless, they're at least getting more out of the lab than they would be not doing it. So I'm glad to do it. And they also get to know their classmates and me a bit more by doing it.
Yeah.
So I'm into that. I guess that's still in the working section. But then in the fall, we're going back to this class where we're not doing groups, and I'm trying to figure out what I want to do with the virtual students.
Because they're only virtual, right, at that time?
Yes. Mm-hmm. So now I have a group of fully virtual students. They're not going to be on iPads with anyone else. So I liked the iPads thing, but what I'm trying to do, this is like a selection of options for lab. Right now I'm doing the iPad thing, and I like the group thing with the iPads. In the fall now I have a group of fully virtual students, which I appreciate that, and I designed it that way so that I can actually meet on Zoom with them and chat with them about the lab directly to them, as opposed to them just being, getting data and doing some extra assignment. So I appreciate that now I'm going to be able to talk to them directly, and we can have some more interaction about the lab material. But yeah, I'm just kind of thinking about what do I want them to do in lieu of actually performing the lab, So I did develop some assignments
last you did, yeah.
semester. Yeah, and it was like thinking about which measurements were critical in the procedure and thinking about, if this mistake happened, what would be the impact on the results, so that they're hopefully thinking through how the chemicals, what the chemicals are doing and what measurements are important and that kind of thing. So I could do that again, but I feel like there's maybe room for improvement in terms of them getting stuff out. So, I don't know, designing more questions to get them to think through the experiment, or maybe having them discuss the procedure with each other somehow. I'm not quite sure what I want to do, but something to get them, I guess what I feel like, I did have these extra assignments, but they still seemed like they didn't really have as good an understanding of what they would have actually done in the lab as I would like them to. And so I want to figure out how I can get them to visualize it a little bit better, even when they're not there.
And I guess two things. One, I don't really know if this is helpful or relevant, but something I have not ever really engaged with, but sort of want to try, is more like peer review for lab assignments. So I don't know if that would be a way to have some more engagement.
Interesting, maybe.
And then I have heard of, like, your stuff is so precise. Mm-hmm. It's not a matter of sending them a few chemicals and getting them to do stuff at home, right?
Yeah, I thought about that, and that would be really cool. And, there are definitely things that you can do for that, for analytical chemistry. But yes, I'm trying to get them to understand how to be quantitative in the lab, and so I could design something, I'm sure, that I could send them that would get into that. But since we're really doing it face-to-face, and then there's also virtual people, I haven't, designed a whole separate thing for the virtual people.
Right, because, we don't talk about this totally on here, and we should, maybe, but workload, is a real thing, and, you're only getting X amount of units, and then to sort of make 2 whole curriculums is, a lot of workload.
Totally. So yeah, I think there are definitely awesome things that you can develop that people can do from their house, but that's not really the direction. I'm trying to figure out how to get them to get a similar experience to the face-to-face people at this point. But maybe I think you're right that it's something to do with peer-to-peer stuff. Like maybe if we get together and go through the experiment and then they talk to each other about the questions or something like that, a little more interactive rather than me just giving them some assignment and
would it be bonkers to try and capture some of like, I keep thinking of the head in the jar, but the face in the iPad. Like, would it be bonkers to pair up people from the virtual with the not virtual and have them video record themselves as part of an assignment or something? Like one group each week was the one who made the video of their experiment, or
totally
like on
possible.
rotation or something to give a bit more flavor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah.
the other
Go
people
ahead.
had to contribute to their data. You could even do something like the person who makes the video doesn't have to do their data stuff that week. And they have to peer review what everyone submits to them or something. But again, I mean, it's a lot of work.
Creative. I like
I know,
this.
it's all just stream of consciousness. But yeah.
No, that's cool. I really like that. Yeah, there's lots of ways that this could go. Like there are other faculty members who are doing, like the virtual iPad partner thing. But I hadn't thought of the students who are doing the experiment, videoing it, and then giving that to the virtual students. That's pretty cool.
I mean, there's a timing issue for sure.
There is a timing issue. I could potentially get some student assistants who could do the experiment a week early, record it, send it to the students, potentially. That's interesting. I'll think about that. But yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm sampling all these different hybrid lab experiments here.
Well, you're
there's
like right
definitely
in
a lot.
I feel like you're right on the kind of cutting edge. Like you were one of the first people to go back and do any face-to-face during this time. And sort of
In our department, there were just 2 last semester. Yeah. In our,
So you're definitely right there.
Experimenting.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and it's wonderful that you are. And I have quite a few students that are in your class, and, you know, going to your class is the highlight of their week, for sure.
It's so nice that they get to come in. They really appreciate it, you know? And I think it's really nice, too, that there's the flexibility, because a lot of people can't come in right now, or it really doesn't work for them to come in right now, and they really appreciate that they're not coming in. So I'm really glad that we have this flexibility.
Totally.
So, cool. Well, this has been interesting to talk about.
Yeah, it has. And I think it's something like, I mean, I'm always interested to hear from people, but I would be super interested to hear people share a little bit maybe about how do you make these decisions about what you need to do. And like, you didn't say this necessarily, but yours seemed, it is a little decided by external factors, where you're doing this quantitative analysis class and it's such a huge part of the skill set is lab skills.
Right. And so as a department, we decided it would be face-to-face.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's
and then as a
super
university,
interesting.
we decided we'd have a virtual option. So yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
Yeah. Okay.
I would be really interested to hear from listeners about what course modalities they're doing and what's working, which ones you guys are liking, which ones you aren't liking. That'd be really interesting.
I heard from someone that like they have like a class of 20 and it rotates who is the 5 people who are in the class each day, and then the rest is online. And for some reason, I like imagining 15 chairs with iPads sitting on them, like facing. I don't know why, but yeah. I mean, I've heard one of my colleagues has a small class, and some people are virtual and some people are face-to-face. And he said, you know, if you have the right technology, it can work really well, where if you have a big screen with everyone's faces on it, and if the people who are virtual can easily switch from being able to see the chalkboard to being able to see the roundtable discussion and can hear everybody, I mean, if you can get all that technology to work, I think it can work really well. For sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, hopefully, I mean, I guess we're just going to... It's so interesting that we sort of recorded all of our progression through this crazy journey on our podcast, but maybe we'll revisit this in next semester and have more stuff to say. So,
that'd be great.
Cool. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. We're delighted to have you as a listener, and we would love to hear from you. And if you want to email us, our address is contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your suggestions for future shows, or professor quotes that you might want to share with us, or even just things that have come up for you when you were listening to previous episodes. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love if you would spread the word. So the best way to spread word is by telling people you know, if you think they should listen to it, or you can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.